Light the beam, because it's time for Nerdy for 30, the podcast where we talk about nerdy-ish movies for 30-ish minutes. My name is Kevin Bauer, a.k.a. The Critic's Choice. With me, as always, is the People's Champ, Tim Keck. And today, I am extremely nervous because I have finally talked Tim into dipping his toes into the Andor water. We're going to start with Rogue One, a Star Wars story. Tim, I'm terrified to ask, what did you think of Rogue One?
This is a great movie. This is a great movie.
God.
I liked
Jesus
it then.
Motherfucking Christ.
I like it now. Honestly, as somebody who is, I think, very much out on Star Wars, nothing Star Wars really gets me excited anymore. Mm-hmm. The worst parts of this movie for me are like the Star Wars-y parts where they're like, great, R2-D2 and C-3PO are here. Like, who gives a fuck, you know? And like, I don't know. There were just moments when I was reminded that this was Star Wars and I was like, I don't need this. Like, who cares? Like, then they go, like, they're doing this whole like top secret mission. They fly through space and then you go to their secret base and it looks like everyone's playing Battleship at their computers. It's a joke. Like, these guys are, I don't know. Now I'm just mad for no reason now. This movie's great. It's so good. It's so awesome. This is like a legit good movie, I think. And I guess what made me think of it is like, it feels so separate from Star Wars. Mm-hmm. And the first time you see Darth Vader in this movie, for me, it felt even jarring. Like, wait, what are we doing? This is not the movie I'm watching right now. And I wasn't really interested in it, even though he's the best. He's like the coolest scene Darth Vader's ever done is in this movie. They just crush everything. This movie looks beautiful. Mm-hmm. It's just, this movie rocks. It's really, really good. Kevin, what do you think of this movie? Is this the best thing Star Wars has done?
This is the best thing Star Wars did between The Empire Strikes Back and Andor. I think I personally, look, I saw Empire late. This is going to lose everybody. I saw Empire pretty late. I don't stand Empire like everybody else does. I'm not as big of a fan of Empire, but I've rewatched it a few times. I can acknowledge it's a damn good movie. It's like a very cool movie. What it did to expand the lore is very cool. And I think Rogue One did the best work since that of expanding on this world and giving you something new from it. Their entire goal in making this movie just was to make a war movie set in the Star Wars universe. We've always heard Star Wars. We haven't seen very much like war depicted in a realistic way because the Clone Wars was anything but. So it's interesting, I think, to take this thing that was founded out of necessity for simplicity of storytelling on these like very stark ideals of good and evil and play around in the gray area a little bit. You know, that's the big thing that worked in episode 8 was the Benicio del Toro character and playing around in the gray space between what's good and what's bad. So taking this time to really live in this world on the ground level, get away from lightsabers for the most part, was the most revolutionary thing they did. And I want to talk about this later on the pod, but I really hope it was the spark that will light the fire of just an adult spinoff of the Star Wars universe. Because I mean, this movie, a lot of the stuff in it is closer in tone to like an R-rated movie than it would be to a PG-13. One of the things I read is that part of the reason they included the K2SO droid is to lighten things up a little bit and bring the tone up so that it'd be more accessible for younger audiences.
Yeah, I mean, his comedy stands out starkly against Felicity Jones and Diego Luna, who are just very tragic. Somber the entire time. Forrest Whitaker comes in and is a real bummer for 15 minutes, and then he just accepts death as a cloud of thing. I mean, I saw his metal feet and was like, he's like, I'm tired of running. And it's like, yeah, it looks like you haven't run in years because you're just an old man with asthma and no feet. I don't know what you expect. But it's Star Wars. You should be able to fly out of here on something, you know? And like, it doesn't even seem like he like tells the rest of his crew to leave. He's just like, Jin, get out of here. Me and the rest of the guys are going down with this planet. And the rest of the guys are like, wait, what did he say? Yeah. and no one else leaves. Just look, they're Jin, like, okay.
Me and the rest of the boys, we're some real dirty dogs. We don't deserve to live another day. You get on that ship and get out of here.
Oh my God, the fearsome Saw Gerrera. If only the enemy had tried attacking the place where he was. Oh man, they could have nipped this in the bud years ago. Oh my God. It is weird. It does. The Star Warsiness of it is interesting because I feel like, and we get it in the prequels, is I want lightsabers. I like lightsabers. They've invented this cool thing. I like seeing the cool thing. It seems a little silly to have a Star Wars property and you don't have any Jedi in it. You're like not even trying to do that. And I'm thinking more about the little bit of Andor I've seen in like Boba Fett and, you know, the Mandalorian and whatever. It just seems like, I don't know why they wouldn't try and give us good things.
I think the proof here is that the lightsabers aren't in and of themselves good things. If anything, everything since Rogue One has turned me against lightsabers to a certain extent because they're being used way too freely now. The kind of shit that we've seen come out of Star Wars in the modern era with like the Inquisitors, suddenly these are people that we're supposed to understand were around doing shit in like the 1970s era of Star Wars. And they have these crazy like lightsabers that spin around and they can fucking fly away with them. Goofy. Just nonsense, dude. Like,
Obi-Wan, yeah.
It's the same way that it kind of breaks reality when we see in the prequel trilogy these insane force powers and these wild lightsaber battles, because it makes it jarring and it makes it feel like a negation when then episode 4 happens and we see the final fight between Obi-Wan and Darth Vader. And it's just like two people with sticks hitting them. You know, Obi-Wan gets slashed, he disappears. Like, it's just nothing. And then we're expected to believe that this epic fight happened between Obi-Wan and Darth Vader in the show Obi-Wan, like 6 years before the old man stick fight we saw. It's just a bummer. And what Rogue One proves to me about that whole thing is that we don't need the over-the-top stuff. It's all a distraction. All of the interesting meat on this bone is in the character work and the motivations of these people, not just digging into like, is the Empire evil, but why is the Empire evil? Like, show us why they are a negative force in the universe. Like, just let us know. Like, show us an actual example, which we see in this. They're ruthless, they're gross. And then that's contrasted with the fact that in order to overturn these people, good people who have suffered personal tragedies have to also turn to ruthless and gross activities in order to get them out of power. It's like, that's fascinating. There's limitless meat on that bone.
That's the most impressed. That's a great point. That's the thing that got me the most hooked is Cassian immediately murdering people.
Yeah, man.
Like, like there's none of this like who shot first bullshit. It is like the good guys are doing bad stuff. Forrest Whitaker tortures some dude.
And it
straight up tortures him.
We know the guy isn't lying. So we just see a protagonist torture another protagonist.
Forrest Whitaker is insane in this movie. He's like, I gotta say, he's the weirdest part of this movie for me. His character's crazy. And the fact that everyone's like, yeah, this is the guy who's gonna, you know, lead us to the rebellion. Like, if this is the best the rebellion has to offer, I'm voting for the Senate because they at least seem like they have their shit together, you know?
Dude, it's crazy. They seem scrappy as hell. And then Mon Mothma, who like you would be forgiven by not recognizing by name in this movie, but she's a big part of Andor. Mon Mothma's the person in the disco robes. She's talking about how like, yeah, Saw's an extremist, but he's basically our option. And like, it helps you wrap your brain around the fact that it's difficult to draw lines when you're trying to accomplish something. In a lot of ways, it kind of reminded me of the Democratic Party, just because it's like, I feel like there's more factions within the Democratic Party than there are within the Conservative Party. And it's harder to get all of the factions within the Democratic Party to align on things than it is to get like conservative ideals to align.
Right. Yeah. I mean, it definitely feels political, especially when it's like, well, we know Felicity Jones is trying to do the right thing. And Mon is just like, nah, we're not doing that. And it's like, okay, well, this happens in government all the time, is that government's main function is to stop people from doing the right thing and for them to make a lot of money. So aside from the money laundering part of it, I did see a deleted scene where Mon was insider trading.
Sure.
Which was pretty interesting. That's the craziest thing. That's why the Emperor is a piece of shit. But yeah, these guys are the rebels. I mean, they're terrorists. And in the original trilogy and even in the prequels, it's very black and white. There's the light side of the Force. There's the dark side of the Force. And it's fun to exist in the gray. Especially because most of these people aren't really into the Force. It's really just Donnie Yen, blind Donnie Yen, who is crushing it. He's incredible. And he's the kind of characterization. I mean, I complained about the lack of lightsabers, but they give us at the end of the movie the best Darth Vader scene of all time.
Yeah.
In the lightsaber slashing, which adds incredible context to the first movie. I mean, it's an incredible lead in to A New Hope. But Donnie Yen is an extension of this idea of the Jedi. The Jedi no longer exist. He is protecting parts of their culture and has at some point committed to it himself and is adapting to it. And his friend is kind of tired of hearing about it, but also, it resonates with him to the degree that it resonated with his friend. And we see the Force acting through him, even though he doesn't have a lightsaber.
It's so cool.
That's the kind of incredibly detailed stuff. I mean, this movie treads that line. I think they try and blur that in like the next trilogy, like last Rise of Skywalker or whatever those fucking movies are called.
Yeah.
I mean, where they're like, oh, Kylo Ren, he's like torn and upset and there's like light and dark. And I just don't buy it in that scenario the same way. It seems like way more cartoonish and hammy. And I think they make a good choice in this, that Felicity Jones and Diego Luna don't kiss at the end.
Yes.
Because they force just a weird kiss between Adam Driver and Daisy Ridley. And it's just, it's gross and it's uncomfortable. And somehow it's so much more powerful for these two in Rogue One to be holding each other and like comforting each other and taking comfort in the fact that they did something that is bigger than them and will continue after them, and that they've kind of both achieved their goals together. And that's more powerful than just a quick makeout session on your way to battle your grandfather, who is, whatever goddamn bullshit they had. I mean, this is incredible. And I think all the great things about it are the things that aren't Star Wars.
Yeah. I mean, I'm right there with you. Like we do get the greatest Darth Vader scene of all time, but I think it may have been, up until that final scene, I think it may have been richer even without Darth's involvement. Reanimating Grand Moff Tarkin through CGI was awful and did not need to be done. Like, we didn't need to see that. You can make it a different general. It's fine.
Yeah. Princess Leia, whatever.
We could have seen her from behind. We didn't need to CG her face. That was traumatizing. It was very strange to see. But I think the franchise overall is stuck in this middle ground where they are still trying to appeal to everyone. And what I don't understand about these big franchises is why they don't acknowledge that there should be different age groups within that franchise. So it seems like for the mainline, like quote unquote Skywalker saga movies, they are trying to go at broad appeal to everyone with blockbuster movies, which ends up meaning some really childish ideas in these movies and some really childish scenes that feel out of place with what older Star Wars fans want, which is something that's more for adults. So that's why I really hope that this is the first offshoot that points at that, because despite the fact that it's PG-13 and it did have some things in here to lighten up the tone, like the robot, like this is the most adult thing that Star Wars has made since the original trilogy. And then Andor coming out is explicitly for adults. Like the joke that even the people involved in the show say is that Andor is the Star Wars show for grown-ups. And I don't know that we're going to get a ton more of it because I don't think a lot of people watched the first season. I think it's extremely critically acclaimed. I know we're getting the second season, but like I'm worried that relative lack of viewership, I feel like they didn't even promote the show as much as they normally would have. And maybe people just don't know to expect this, but like I'm worried that it's going to signal the end of adult interpretations of these franchises, where what we should be getting from the MCU is an acknowledgement of the fact that we're, 15, 16 years deep into this thing. I think 16 years this year. So even the people that were in high school when Iron Man came out, like us, we're in our 30s now. The people who were 10 when Iron Man came out are 26 now. Like they're adults. They can handle like adult entertainment. So it's okay when they do some more kids stuff, but it should be explicitly for kids. And we should be trusted with an adult line of entertainment. Make Blade a hard R. I think Deadpool's rated R, right? Deadpool looks great. Like all the Deadpool movies have been awesome. So dig into the fact that you have different age groups represented and make content tailored for each of them, because when you're trying to make it appeal to everybody, it just falls apart and you lose people with a lot of expendable income in our age range. Why is there not an adult take on Pokemon? Like, look how big of a success Pal World was. It's, for those who haven't heard of Pal World, it's a Steam game that's a Pokemon knockoff with guns and people love it. And I don't want a Pokemon knockoff with guns, but I want to play a Pokemon game that's fun and isn't for babies, which most of the Pokemon games are.
Yeah, I mean, it's good to know that you have lots of disposable income. I'd say that first and foremost. I think we could really use some of that on the pod.
Yeah, dude, I'm going to start throwing all of my tens of wealth at you. I want to make very clear that was a relative statement. I can afford I don't know if our demographic.
I think the kids with parents, probably with older parents, are probably still the people with the most money. I don't know if maybe ignoring the millennials is like an intentional choice. We're all like broke and miserable. Not everybody's miserable. I agree. Yeah, that but I think we ran into a weird issue with this idea of separation with Madam Web, because I heard a bunch of people be like, oh, it's a Marvel movie. And every time it's like, no, this isn't not a Marvel movie. This is Sony making a movie with some leftover characters that they bought from Marvel. It's just, this is unrelated. It's not in the same universe. It's bullshit. But for the average person, that's just, they think it's all the same thing. So I think maybe if someone's wondering if their kid should get into Star Wars and their first experience is Rogue One, maybe that discourages them from buying them a Yoda plushie or something. I don't know. I'm curious to see how this works with Deadpool, because it's an R-rated movie. It's in the MCU. How does that work? Are there going to be parents that are really like, actually, you can't watch Deadpool to kids?
Probably,
Deadpool's one of like the most popular movies of, it's insanely popular. I feel like if you are in, gosh, what is it? It's PG-13. So when is that? Middle school, elementary school? I feel like if you're in the 5th grade and you haven't seen Deadpool, you're a loser,
5th grade. Where was I in 5th grade?
Yeah. Well, how old is that 5th grade?
I don't know if I think I saw Blade when I was in 5th grade. So yeah, that checks out. I probably would have been allowed to see Deadpool.
Yeah, but then if you're a 5th grader, then what about 4th grade? I don't know. What grade are people watching our movies? Email the show.
Yeah.
Let me know.
I think I saw The Matrix when I was 9. So I didn't understand it, but I thought it was really cool.
Right. Like, what in Deadpool is so, I guess Deadpool's pretty messed up, but
yeah.
Yeah, I think that line is tricky to walk, and I understand why Marvel is hesitant to do it, and I understand why Star Wars is hesitant to do it. Yeah, it's interesting. I do think my other opinion with the Star Wars stuff is that, I mean, we've had 3 trilogies that are basically the same story, and it's weird. It'd be like if every movie that was set in America was about Joe Biden, and it's just young man Joe Biden, old man Joe Biden, VP Joe Biden. And after a while, you're like, so is Joe Biden the only person in the United States? You'd be like, I don't know. Can we go to Montana and see what those kids are up to? Like, let's venture out a little bit. Why is it just the same thing being beat into our heads over and over again? They've gone out of their way to create such a fascinating, wide world with so much lore that you could just pick a planet, like literally just throw a dart at a map and come up with a story set there.
Yeah.
And you could do it. You've got enough a world. I mean, and Rogue One, I think, is a model of that where they set out to make a war movie. And then at the end, they kind of paint over it with Star Wars. And I think that's the model that would probably create the best movies. Whether or not that makes them the most money, I think, is the real question. But I was kind of surprised how invested I was in Ben Mendelsohn when I don't know who this guy. I've never seen this character before. And yet he's a great villain. He's there at the end. He gets shot. I'm glad he gets his comeuppance, but also he's complicated. And I feel a little bad for him. The Grandpa stole his idea. But he's a piece of shit. And it's just complicated and fun. And he's as good a bad guy as anyone not named Darth Vader in Star Wars.
Dude, you don't even know it yet. And you already got Andor pilled. This is great. This is great for me.
So is he in Andor?
He is not in Andor.
Cassian is in Andor.
Cassian is, yeah. So
that's weird.
Yeah, so it's set. I want to say it's set like I'm not sure of the exact timeline of how early it is, but
it's before this.
It's before this. Cassian at the beginning of it is not formally a member of the Resistance yet. So it's interesting then to go back and watch Rogue One because he's so much more of like a team player and someone that can be relied on. And I mean, he's a general. Like in this one, he is a general. He is acting as a limb of a larger organization. Whereas in Andor, he's, I wouldn't say only out for himself, but like he has much more of a self-preservation mindset. So it's like he walks it well. It's not unbelievable, but it does feel like you're seeing a character much later in their life. And that's cool to see. Like this is not the Andor that you see in the show Andor is a different character than the one you see here. He just has a long way to go.
Yeah. Do you think anything, I read something recently about spoilers basically. And I really, try to avoid spoilers at all costs, avoid the trailer. Mm-hmm. But they said there's something exciting about knowing what's coming that you can still have good enjoyment. Sure. You still enjoy the movie. I think they were arguing even more when you know what's coming and you see it coming. But there is something in me that, I hate flashbacks in movies too. Let's go back to the beginning. Let's like start, in the past or whatever. Let's backtrack. The fact that Cassian is in this movie and I know he's just going to be alive and happy in Andor is a little bit of a bummer. I'm not saying it's a turnoff from Andor completely, but it's kind of lame. It's the same problem you have with seeing Obi-Wan Kenobi and in the prequels. It's the same thing with Star Wars. And I think it would be cool if Star Wars would again just throw a dart at the map, pick a completely new, just come up with something else. Live in that world where we just don't have any strings attached. Why does everything need to be connected again to this like main timeline, and why do we have to get a prequel of something we've already seen the end of? And I think that's stupid. It kind of takes the wind out of my sails a little bit and kills my enjoyment of some of these properties like that.
In the context of Andor specifically, I would argue that it's less about the individual importance of Cassian, because to a certain extent, there's not anything necessarily that like anybody else couldn't have done under certain conditions than Cassian. He's not superpowered. He's not the world's greatest pilot. He's not anybody special. He has gotten to a point in his life where he has unfortunately made peace with the fact that he has to make really morally disappointing decisions like killing someone at the beginning of the movie just because he represents a threat to the rebellion and to his own self-interest. So like,
which is great. I love it.
The power that he brings to the table is his ability to do uncomfortable things. There's nothing that makes him, outside of his personal experience, especially susceptible to doing that. So theoretically, like the story of Andor could have been about somebody else. Diego Luna's a really good character though. And it is interesting knowing where he ends up and kind of seeing where he starts in Andor and connecting the two pieces is interesting in the same way that it's interesting to see the burnt out Matthew McConaughey at the beginning of True Detective and then hit a flashback and he is like much more by the books and straight laced. And you're like, how the fuck did you get there? It's not as far of a jump. Because spoiler for like the very first thing that happens in Andor, but he kills another guy. So like Andor kicks off with seeing him kill another guy. So it's like it's pretty dead on to what we see happening here.
That's good.
Yeah. But his reasoning behind it is a little bit different. And to see him playing for himself versus playing for another team, it's really cool. In general, the show Andor mostly serves to give you more tastes of what life is like under Empire rule and to show really interesting struggles for power and really interesting consequences of decisions throughout like an ecosystem in the galaxy, which is like, I don't know that I've seen it done in this big of a scale before outside of like Game of Thrones, where they spent seasons building out a whole world where you're introduced to a bunch of different aspects of life, a bunch of different planets, a bunch of different situations. And then you can draw a line through the series to see exactly how this one seemingly arbitrary decision here led to a loss of life down the line. Which is, I mean, that's life. We just talked
whatever.
In the Ghost episode.
I'm tired of talking about Andor, though. Like I'm not going to watch it. So why are we even bothering with it? You said you wanted to drill me on some Star Wars stuff, though.
Yeah, I just wanted to like drill you. We basically got to it. I just wanted to ask what you thought about Cassian. And
okay. Yeah. So I beat you to the punch.
Yeah,
I like Cassian a lot. I think he is emblematic of this complicated storytelling. And I like it. I kind of wish Jin had been a little more Cassian, like a little more shades of gray. Jin just seems like kind of an uninteresting character. I like Felicity Jones a lot, but she is kind of just on this one. I guess she changes her mind and decides to commit to her father's vision and all of that. But it would be neat to see her make a hard choice as well, where it seems like Cassian is making hard choices, like not refusing to kill her father, I think is a big choice from him.
Yeah.
And that's really complicated and interesting. And the fact that there was a character who was willing to do it is great. I mean, we don't see any in the movies. We don't get any, Obi-Wan Kenobi debating whether or not he should kill, some, Luke.
Yeah.
Skywalker. That's just like not a conversation being had. He's a good guy. It's the light side of the Force. He's not tempted in that way, So yeah, I mean, the shades of gray are great. I mean, that's what you want, right?
Yeah. I mean, that's one thing I kind of liked about the sequel trilogy is the fact that Luke for a moment was like, do I fucking kill my nephew? Like he sensed like such great evil potential in him that he lit up the lightsaber. And again, like to map it onto the Marvel Cinematic Universe, that's what was cool about Doctor Strange in Infinity War, where Doctor Strange was point blank like, I will let you die. Like, I will let you and Peter Parker die to protect this stone.
Yeah. Yeah. That is fun and complicated. I mean, I'm wondering really, maybe that's why people did not like Luke Skywalker's portrayal in like the later trilogy, is that this is a character who's given up hope, and that's just not what Luke Skywalker would ever do. And I'm wondering how malleable the Force actually is, and if this is just really being forced in the later trilogy, because it seems pretty cut and dry. And I think George Lucas's vision of the Force is pretty cut and dry, where there's a light side, there's a dark side, there is balance. 2 exist on the light side, 2 exist on the dark side. If one dies, then there's a correction on the other side. Like it is kind of like a little algebra, or like what do you call it? Like some scales where just, the light side gets bigger. So now we've got to add the dark side, and it just all balances out. And even Diego Luna's character Cassian, like he's not involved in the Force. So maybe that's why he's able to exist more in these shades of gray. Whereas Donnie Yen's character is driven by the Force, aided with the Force to do this thing for some reason. And that's interesting to me.
Yeah.
The idea that he is like, why is the Force helping him here? Why is the Force preventing him from getting shot when he just walks across a field of missiles flying? The Force in some way is deciding that the rebels need help because the dark side of the Force has grown so much. but who's the dark side of the Force? Is that
Darth
just Darth
Emperor.
Vader, or is that the entire galaxy? Is Ben Mendelsohn the dark side of the Force? Is Cassian the dark side of the Force when he murders people? You know, like, I don't know. Yeah. I did think it was, there were some interesting things with like the Blue Squadron.
Oh, yeah.
I noticed they have a blue Squadron in Rogue One, and it's all gold and red in the original trilogy. Yep. And it's like, oh, Blue Squadron all got fucked up on this mission. There's no more Blue Squadron. I'm like, that's badass. That's a great Star Wars-ism. I do love the I like this. Anytime they're like prepping to take off in the X-Wings or whatever, there's always a slow-moving golf cart with people riding on it. And people in this movie are just jogging past these guys. And there's some very stern, you know, background character actors just like staring into space and being really into it. Dude, and this movie looks gorgeous.
Oh, it's so good.
Do any of the other Star Wars movies look this good? Because is this the best explosion you've ever seen in a Star Wars movie? Because the moment when they first use the Death Star, and each of those explosions is kind of gorgeous, right? Yeah.
The only other one that I would bring up is one of the coolest things I've ever seen in a sci-fi movie, which was the Holdo maneuver in Episode 8, where they go warp speed through a Star Destroyer. That's a space explosion, so I think it's a little different.
Well, in this one, they go to light speed trying to get off planet, and that was awesome. Like everything, they just made a bunch of awesome choices in this.
Dude, it's
that
Gareth
were so
Edwards.
Cool.
Gareth Edwards is the director of like Monsters. He's the director of The Creator that came out last year. This guy's a vibe king. It is what he does. What he doesn't do as well is satisfying story. So he's got incredible ideas. He sets up these gorgeous, gorgeous movies, but I feel like he doesn't always bring it home all the way for the audience. And then they brought in Tony Gilroy to do Punch Up on this, who's the guy who later did Andor. And like, it's the perfect marriage, because what Tony Gilroy does so well is story and political intrigue and subtext. So to have him come in and do a lot of work, I guess most of the work that he did on this is in the third act, which is where it really sings. To have him come in and like land the plane after Gareth Edwards sets up like the most beautiful intergalactic movie I've ever seen. It's like, it's amazing. I wish they would do more of these that are just that creative team working together again.
It'd be great. I mean, they're fantastic. I mean, the last hour of the movie is the fight of them trying to get this information off planet. I mean, this movie flies by.
It really does.
It's just, there's like no meat on the bone. There's like there's no fat. There's no fat on the story.
Yeah.
It's great. It crushes. I do also think it's funny. They always have meetings around a table, and I'm like, who gets to stand at the table? Because there's a very clear delineation between like Felicity Jones standing at the table with Cassian, and then there's always people like behind her in the dark, you know? like they're lighted so they're not there. and like, okay, I don't know this Felicity, I don't know Jin, but all of a sudden she gets to stand at the table with Mon. Crazy.
Yeah.
I also don't know what the Gatling gun does.
Oh, the Gatling gun that
seems,
he's got a weird dude has
Gatling gun backpack. Yeah. And do we need bullets for the blasters? Is it stronger than other blasters? It shoots like pretty fast, but
then Chirrut's taking down TIE fighters with his like longbow. So
that's crazy.
Why did you just have one of those?
That gets like kind of weak at the end though. Once he's on planet, I was like, why isn't this causing massive explosions again?
Yeah.
Blind Donnie Yen in this is insane. He's the best.
God, shout out Blind Donnie Yen forever.
Hope he's in Andor.
No spoilers.
Oh my God.
He's not.
Okay, I'm watching it.
I'm so sorry.
Oh, fuck. Okay, I'll skip it. No interest. Thank you.
Maybe season 2. Hopefully season 2. God, give us more Blind Donnie Yen.
I'll watch it. It'd be great.
All right, listener, what do you think? Rogue One, best Star Wars movie since Empire, best Star Wars movie of all time? Send us an email, nerdy30@gmail.com. We'll read it on the show. We'll also be back here again next week. Thank you so much for listening. See you then. Stay nerdy, everybody. Bye.
Bye.
Tim, I'm so glad you liked it.
Of course I liked it. It's a great movie.